Does the Israel-Hamas war mean that we are living in the last days of history? That's the sort of thing you'll hear from various outlets on social media and other places on the internet. The fact that Israel has been attacked by a terrorist organization means that some sort of eschatological end times clock has been launched, and we're coming down to the end of all things. In this video, we'll take a look at last days language in the Bible and explain why it doesn't mean what those sorts of folks say that it means. We'll also take a minute to consider how the book of Revelation functions and why it should not be used to perpetuate readings that try to map out the end of the world. My name is Matt O'Reilly, and this is Theology Project. If you're new to Theology Project, thanks for stopping by. Be sure to like this video and subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll get notified when new videos post, and you can keep up with everything going on at Theology Project, where we work to bring the Bible to life. So, are we in the last days? Does the Hamas attack on Israel mean that we're in the last days? The answer is no. That's not how last days language works in the New Testament. And a key text to illustrate this is in Acts chapter 2. In Acts chapter 2, the Holy Spirit has come, and Peter, the lead apostle, is preaching and addressing the crowd, explaining what's happening in the Holy Spirit being poured out on the church. And in Acts chapter 2, verse 17, we read these words. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your young men shall see visions, your old men shall dream dreams. So what's happening in this text? Peter, who's preaching, is quoting the prophet Joel in the Old Testament, who is looking forward to the day that the Holy Spirit of God is poured out on the earth, on all flesh, on the church. And that has now happened. Jesus has died and been raised from the dead. And now the Holy Spirit, who was promised, has come. And Peter is trying to explain all of that. And he does so in context of what the prophet Joel had to say. Now, here's the interesting thing. The prophet Joel says that in the last days, the Spirit will be poured out on all flesh. Peter, in the first century, is saying that has happened. So how does last days language in the New Testament function? The last days is the period that begins when the Holy Spirit comes. The last days is the period that begins on the day of Pentecost in the first century. And it's a way of speaking about the entire period of time between the day of Pentecost in the first century, described in Acts 2, and the second coming of Jesus. So last days isn't this particularly bad period of time that lasts for a few months or years right before Jesus returns. Last days in the Bible is a way of talking about the period of time between the comings of Jesus, particularly the coming of the Holy Spirit after Jesus is raised from the dead, and then the second coming of Jesus when he will return and raise the dead who belong to him and make a new creation. So when people ask me, hey, is it the last days? I always like to say, yes, it's the last days, and it's been the last days for 2,000 years, and it will continue to be the last days until Jesus comes back. So does the Israel-Hamas war mean that we're in the last days? No, it doesn't have anything to do with that. The coming of the Holy Spirit 2,000 years ago, that's what means we're in the last days. And the last days might go on for quite some time, as they already have. The second thing I want to mention, as this conflict in Israel has arisen, a lot of people are saying, well, this is this event in Revelation, or this is described in Revelation this way. Revelation is the last book of the New Testament. It is a vision, and it's got a lot of symbols and a lot of images and a lot of characters. It quotes the Old Testament a ton, and it's incredibly complicated and difficult to figure out. But one of the main things is that the book of Revelation is not a roadmap for our future. It's not sort of a history book written ahead of time. That's how people frequently read it, as if it's future history. And if you know the code, you can figure out which events in Revelation correspond to which events are happening in the news today. But that's not how Revelation was intended to function. In its original intent, Revelation functions in three different ways. Number one, it is written to encourage and comfort persecuted Christians. The original recipients of Revelation, many of them were being persecuted locally in their communities, and Revelation is written to encourage them to be faithful, not to cave in to the pressure, but to be faithful. Number two, Revelation is written to critique the people who oppressed the Christians. So in the ancient world, and this is where the beast image comes through in the book of Revelation, the dragon kind of images. Revelation associates those sort of monstrous images with powers in the world that oppress and persecute the people of God. In the first century, the obvious candidate is the Roman Empire, and the first century Christians would have associated the beast and the other monstrous characters in Revelation as expressions of the Roman Empire, of the Roman Empire's power. And if you want to apply that across history, then regimes or governments or powers that oppress the people of God, Revelation critiques them and declares that the judgment of God will come upon them. So number one, Revelation comforts persecuted Christians, critiques those who persecute Christians. Number three, it offers a word of correction or warning to people who might be in the church but are tempted to hedge their bets by playing nice with the oppressors. Right, so in the first century, you've got folks who maybe they were a part of a Christian community, but they were still going to worship at the local temples of the Roman gods. They were kind of hedging their bets, trying to stay in good standings with society and culture, but worship Jesus as well. And Revelation critiques that and offers a stern warning against that and calls people like that to be faithful to the one God revealed in Jesus and the Spirit. So are we in the last days? Is Revelation sort of unfolding right in front of us? Not at all. That's not what's happening. We should not read events that are happening in the news cycle onto the book of Revelation. We should read Revelation the way it was intended. And the last days language, as we've indicated, refers to the whole period of time between the coming of the Spirit at Pentecost in the first century and the coming of Jesus at some point in the future. My name is Matt O'Reilly. This is Theology Project. Thanks for watching. Again, if you found this helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up so that other people can see it. Share it on your social media platforms. And don't forget to subscribe, tap that bell, and you'll get the next video when it goes live. Thanks again for watching.